Hi, good afternoon. To quote my friend Phil Spencer, happy Wednesday, everybody. Good to be here with you at Perspective Shift, where I'm live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. And the idea of Perspective Shift is this. It started as this weekly newsletter. You can see down here at the bottom, if you go to this URL, colbymartin.substack.com, you can get my newsletter called Perspective Shift sent to you every Wednesday morning. Let me know in the comment section if you got today's. Let me know if you're subscribed. I'm just curious how many are out there, because it says it sends it to like 4,300 of my subscribers, but I don't actually know if that's real or not. Yeah, so I started this series, I started this newsletter, Perspective Shift. And then the world collapsed because of the coronavirus. And so much of our lives got pushed to this virtual world, this virtual space. And I started to learn a lot of things about live streaming. And if you know anything about me, I also co-pastor a church. And so we started live streaming our church on Sunday mornings. And I started to really enjoy this format of live streaming. And I thought, what if, in addition to writing my weekly articles, I also then read it to people? But what if I didn't just read it? What if I read it while they could see my face and see the words and sometimes even have accompanying graphics? And what if we did all this live so that people could participate in it? And so I've been doing that for several months now, fairly consistently on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific. I hop on here and I share the weekly article with you, and I read it. And I pause throughout the readings of it to interact with people who I see, because if you're watching on the YouTubes or the Facebooks, I can see your comments technology. And I get to have my day made with comments like this. Mandy literally took Wednesdays off work so that she can hang out with me here. And then later tonight at the Kate and Colby show, holy cow, Mandy, you get a gold star. Pretty sure I have a gold star here for you. Where is it? Where's my gold star? Mandy, I promise you a gold star. I'm going to get you a gold star. Everyone else, you just wait. Just talk amongst yourselves, chat back and forth. I am giving Mandy her gold star. I don't even care that this is going to be an awkward moment of dead air. I don't care. I am content with that because she deserves it. Yes, here it is. Ready? This is for you, Mandy. That was so tiny. I really wanted it to be larger. That is all pixelated, and it is for you, Mandy. And I'm going to set it right here. And I'm even going to title it Mandy's Star. If you're wondering why Mandy's star is up here, it's because Mandy took today off just to hang out with us here, and then later tonight at the Kate and Colby show. So Mandy, that's your star. Okay, that was exciting. Done. Phil got a kick out of. He enjoyed that move that you made. No, not embarrassing. What's up, Andrew? Andrew, I got your message. I will respond to you when I can. But also thank you for the kind words there. It's good to have you. Okay. Yes, Phil, I know. Look, finally got it. Just took me a minute, okay? It wasn't where I thought it was, but Mandy's star is now on the screen. All right. Yes, Jesse. Okay, so Jesse is talking about tonight on the Kate and Colby show. We have special guest. Her name is Candace Zubernat, and Candace founded what she calls the Christian Closet, which I think began just as an organization with just her. And now if you go to their website, they have like 40,000, that's not true, but they have a lot of therapists, and it's all exclusively LGBTQ identifying therapists. And they do incredible therapy work in the space of those who identify LGBTQ and or some religious identity. And it's just gorgeous. And Candace is an amazing human. So she's coming to join myself and my wife, Kate, tonight on the Kate and Colby show. So if you haven't joined us for that yet, that's also on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Great. All right. I know it's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. Okay. let's go ahead and go to this scene here, because this is why I'm here today. Well, in addition to hanging out with you, because we are continuing working through this series on the authority of the Bible. Sorry, Mandy, your star went away. And if you haven't yet, if you're watching me on YouTube and you haven't hit subscribe to my channel, that would really be meaningful if you did that. And if you're watching this on the Facebooks and you haven't yet clicked like on my page, that'd be helpful too. The little things that you can do that tell your people who make stuff, it just means a lot. Okay, here we go. This is part 4. And I have no idea how many parts are going to be in this thing when all is said and done. I thought it was just going to be a 2-week thought on the authority of the Bible. Turns out I have more to say. It turns out I have more things happening inside my skull, specifically the brain part of it, than I thought I did. And so this is this morning's, today's part 4. And my subtitle for now is called "The Source Has to Be Good and Deserving of Our Submission." And hopefully, if you haven't caught up with previous parts, i.e. 1, 2, and 3, you can either go to my Substack page, you see the link right there, and you can read them, or right here on my YouTube channel are all the past weeks as well, videos. So let's dive in. And again, if at any point you want to interact or post a question or ask a thing, feel free to drop it in the comment section. Going to run out of Roman numerals soon. I don't know if that's true, Phil, but I do know that what is true is that I might run out of my knowledge of Roman numerals. But I think I know how to get to 10, and then you're just sort of repeating the 1 through 9s with the X's. I think I'll be fine for a while. Dear Lord, may I not be that long-winded. So says most everyone who's ever met me. All right, part 4 of the authority of the Bible. The source has to be good and deserving of our submission. Here we go. And it starts like this. There's a word that I used a lot in my parenting for the first decade or so of being a dad. It was a word that I just inherited from a combination of my own upbringing and from the culture that I came from. It was a word that I assumed was standard parenting jargon 101. It was a word that I used freely, thinking it was just innocuous. It was just simply a way to communicate what is. And then a number of years ago, my wife, brilliant mother that she is, tenderly shared with me one afternoon when she heard me use this word with one of my sons. She shared that she had stopped using that word with our kids quite a long time ago. And she would love for me to consider also maybe dropping it from my lexicon. And what's this word I'm talking about? I'm talking about the word obey. Obey. And if you are a parent or have been a parent or had a parent, is that everybody? Then you could probably think about how that gets used. Like, go clean up your room. Why? Because I said I need you to obey me. Just little things like that again I thought was innocuous, and I just thought just describing what needs to happen. You need to obey me. The dark side of obey. At first, I thought Kate was kind of just being overly woo-woo with her gentle, mindful approach to parenting, which was how I used to think. Now I'm like, oh my God, her whole approach is freaking brilliant. And I remember saying or thinking, or maybe both, I'm like, seriously, you don't think we should tell our kids to obey us? And she went on to explain that this word obey, it carries with it this air of, I have all the power in this dynamic, and your only option here is to submit, obey. And so instead, she suggested that I try on this word respect. The idea being that we want our kids to respect us, and therefore freely choose to either cease doing that thing or commence with the doing of this thing. With the word like obey, there's really little to no choice in the matter, and it just robs the child of their liberty. Whereas framing it as respect can then empower them and shows them that, well, you respect them as well. I respect you, and I'm inviting you to respect me. And you do this thing not because you have to obey me, but you do it because you respect me. For me, it was one of those, holy crap, that makes so much sense moments. I don't want a relationship with my kids where they just obey me, because that's the expectation. I'm the parent, they're the child, they must obey. Sure, stuff might get done, their room might get picked up, or the bickering might stop. But in the end, if they're only doing it because they have to, which is the obey part, and not because they choose to, which is the respect part, then I'm not sure in the long run that we're building the kind of relationship that either of us would want. And then I write, I'm so grateful that my wife made this change so many years ago and then invited me to join her in it, because not only has it made me a better parent, I believe, but it's helped to shift some of how I think about what it means to be in relationship with God. And so I'm going to continue this series on the authority of the Bible. And here in this article, I'll reflect on where the authority of the Bible comes from, which is God, spoiler alert, and how then that's got me thinking about relational postures within the authoritative source recipient dynamic. Or maybe this authoritative source recipient dynamic. Specifically, if I'm going to submit to a given authority, then this authority needs to be good and worthy of my respect. It needs to be a good authority. All right, so that's my opening premise. And then I'm in a minute here, I'll recap a little bit of last week, but I want to just now check in with the comments. So I tend to break up my articles into different headings, and then when I do these live shows, I turn into the comments periodically. Oh, Mandy loved her star. Good, I'm so glad. Oh, Paul Queen. Hey, haven't seen you pop on here in a while. Maybe you've been here, but you just haven't commented. So it's good to see you from Texas. Y'all are having a moment, a weather moment. Yeah, dropping. Hey, what's up, Colton? Good to meet you. Good to have you on here. Dropping authoritarianism. Yes, I would hope so. Susan says when she read the word obey this morning, she kept hearing the hymn, "Trust and obey, for there's no other way." I don't know if I remember the hymn. Then to dirty Lord lead us, then to trust and obey. I think I made up a melody there towards the end. Oh, Phil, throwing some scripture at me. This will be fun. Ephesians 6:1, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Heard this over and over, but people forget the qualifier in the Lord, which to me suggests that you don't obey indiscriminately. Oh, that's an interesting take. I like that. That's an interesting thought. I'm also, my first instinct with anything like that is to be like, okay, what's the Greek word that was used there? Okay, so because obey is probably just a way to translate it. And I don't know, call me skeptical, but I just don't always trust English translators. Not that I'm all that, not that I'm any better. The people who do the translations have done far more studying the Greek than I will ever do in my lifetime. But still, they're not immune from shoving their own little perspectives into the translation. Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate this framing. The way you describe the posture of respect is a very loving approach. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, so then back to today's post. I do a quick recap on last week's, so part 3, which was titled 4 Kinds of Authority. So last week I suggested there are 4 ways that authority can be expressed and experienced. And it was fun to hear from some of you that, what about this or what about that? And so that's what I was inviting you to do, because part of this, I'm just thinking this stuff out loud, working it out here with you in community. And so I don't at all pretend that this is the best way to talk about this at all, or encapsulates all of it, but it's how I'm thinking about it at the moment. So I suggested there's 4 ways that authority can be expressed and experienced. You have impotent authority, which is that the source of authority is legitimate. They quote unquote have authority, but the subjects in question just ignore it. And so then this authority is impotent. There really isn't authority at that point because nobody is even paying attention to it. Or it might be a rejected authority, which is similar to impotent, but instead of ignoring, they then resist it and they rebel against it and they reject it. So then could you even call it authority because it's being rejected or resisted. Then you have controlling authority, which someone referenced earlier, authoritarianism, where the source of authority is legitimate and the subjects sort of, they submit to it, but they do it from a place of obligation or control. And then finally, you have what I'm calling agreeable authority, which is the source of authority is legitimate and the subjects submit to it, but they do it from a place of consensual acquiescence. They agree to come underneath the authority. So for me, a word like obey conjures up a type of controlling authority. I have all the power here, I'm the authority, and your role is to obey, to follow orders. Whereas a word like respect conjures up a type of relationship wherein those under a particular authoritative source willingly accept said authority from a place of freedom. They freely choose to honor the authority figure or the authority source, in part, if not wholly, because the authority figure has earned their respect. And I'm curious, Mandy, and I don't know if your partner, Captain Sarah, is it Sarah, right, are watching, but I've been curious how these thoughts land with those who serve in the military, because as far as I understand it, the part of how the whole military even survives is through a type of like following orders. And I am not at all coming here saying that is a bad dynamic. The whole point here is not that to contrast. Now, as a parent, yes, I might say that the respect path might be more beneficial to the well-being of everybody than the obey path. But that's just one dynamic. When you're talking about military, when you're talking about, for instance, the heat of the battle, you do have to just have that sort of chain of command, obey. But that's a different context than the context that I'm hoping to engage with here as we talk about the authority of the Bible. But anyway, I don't know if Captain Sarah's watching this, or Mandy, if you have any thoughts on that. 'Cause Mandy, I don't know if you serve as well. I can't remember. So back to that Ephesians 6:1, where I talked about the different translations here. Colton chimes in and says that David Bentley Hart translates it as heed and not obey. Heed, which is the pay attention to, take notice of. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all then that word had maybe other ways to imagine it than just the obey sense. Phil even brought the Greek in, hypokouao, to listen, to hearken, to knock at the door, and by extension, hearken to a command. This is fun. Phil with Southern English. Mind your parent. I'm not going to try Southern English. So then here, back to the article here, is the authority good? One of the differences that I see between this controlling authority, shorthand of obey, and agreeable authority or respect, is that the goodness of the source, the goodness of the authority in a controlling environment is a non-starter. Like, it doesn't really matter in the context of sort of the obey, controlling authority context. It doesn't really matter if the source is good. It doesn't matter if they're good or okay. Yeah. So I'm like, what did I write there? It doesn't matter if they're good or not. They are the boss. Great. That's what I said. Period. They call the shots. You just obey. Sure, perhaps the authority figure is good or neutral, aka a basketball coach telling their players what to do, how to run the play, how to win the game. And this goes back to what I was saying a minute ago about military. Like, that is just the dynamic. Oftentimes in some contexts, it's a necessary dynamic. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It just is. And then, of course, you can also imagine a scenario in which the authority figure, the authority source, is cruel, aka a dictator, ordering troops to commit genocide, etc. But the point here is that obedience in these sort of contexts, to obey and to come underneath the authority of in these contexts, isn't dependent on the goodness of the source. It's just, it doesn't really matter for that. Whereas if we're talking about respect, if we're talking about this agreeable kind of authority, where you acquiesce to and you submit to that type of authority, then as I see it, everything hinges on the goodness of the authoritative source. If the source is not good, then it is not deserving or worthy of respect, and vice versa. So what does this have to do with the Bible? Well, I think it's this. I think that in order for the Bible to possess a place of authority in our lives, it must do so with the agreeable kind. That's what last week was about. The Bible is not meant to be a controlling or manipulative sort of authority. And that therefore means that the source of the Bible's authority has to be good and worthy of our respect. Does that make sense? It kind of does to me enough to have written this, although I think I'm still working it out. And then I just have an aside here that to the religious person who thinks that the Bible is actually a controlling type of authority, I can only say, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. Like, I've already written about this. I'm fully convinced that the Bible is not a book of rules. It is not a law book. It is not something designed with the intent to control and dictate people's lives in that way. It's just not what it is. And then I say this, and then to the person though who accepts, like maybe like similar to me, accepts that the Bible, it might very well occupy a place of agreeable authority in our lives, and yet to that person who accepts that and yet they refuse to, or they haven't yet acknowledged that some parts of the Bible are not deserving of our respect. Some parts of the Bible are not deserving of our respect or are not worthy of our submission. Come on now, because it's not good. Then I say to that person, wake up. Wake up. Like, let those who have eyes to see, and ears to hear. All right, so that's what I'm going to talk about here in the next few sections. But I'm curious what you think so far. How's this landing for you so far? The premise that the Bible is going to be at all an authority in our life. It has to be an agreeable type of authority in which we sort of agree, have the freedom to agree to submit to its authority. And then the authority has to be good, has to be worthy of our sort of coming underneath it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I'm wrong about a lot of things. Oh, Mandy. I'm sorry. I send you my love. Message me offline if you need to talk. Andrew says, I'm hearing a difference between an authority that exists versus an authority that's personal. Yeah, it's a good way to distinguish it, I think. Yeah. I could go with that. Hey, Junior, what's up? It's good to see you again. It's been a few weeks. How can you say you're just wrong if you yourself do not know for sure? I don't know. Sometimes I give myself the freedom to just make bold statements. Moderation in all things, including moderation. So sometimes I just come out saying bold things. How can you make an absolute statement without having an absolute stance yourself? Without having an absolute, well, my absolute stance is that the Bible is not a rule book and was not written with the intent to be a law book to control people. So that is my absolute stance. Therefore, if someone thinks that it is that, I say you're wrong. Yeah. Colton, I'm not sure when you agreed, but you said I agree. Would you feel comfortable extending that to God? That is, that whoever you believe God to be, they must be praiseworthy to merit our praise, submission. Yes, I think. So let's keep going because I get into a little bit of that, and I might agree with that sentence the way you put it. Phil adds, there's so much danger in submitting blindly without understanding why. So much evil has been committed by the church over the past 2,000 years in the name of obeying church leadership. That's correct. Yes. Yep. For too long, the church has operated with this obey mentality, and it has not gone well. It has robbed people of freedom. It has robbed people of choice. It is controlled. It's not good. Okay, so here, next section. When the source in question is not good. Here we go. Keep going. So when we talk about the authority of the Bible, what we're really talking about is that we believe that all authority resides with God and that God has then divested said authority into the pages of the Bible. In other words, to say it differently, many Christians would just stop calling the Bible authoritative if they stopped believing that God is its divine author. It's not so much that the Bible has authority, it's that God has authority. And then many Christians believe that we receive that authority via the Bible. And this is a thing I think is worth bringing to the front of our consciousness, because I think it often sits in our subconscious. When we talk about the authority of the Bible, I think what we really are saying, whether we're conscious of it or not, is that actually we believe God has authority and then God has divested that authority into the Bible. I don't think people are actually saying that just the words on the page, independent of its source, has authority. No, what they're saying is this carries the authority of God. So I think we know that. I just think that sometimes it's worth bringing that sort of into, like I said, the front of our consciousness, so that because I think that matters here for a second. And then I do have this little side note here. When you actually read the Bible, you discover that if and when God does do something like grant authority or divest divine authority into something, it's always done for humans. In other words, human beings become the vessel for God's authority, not the ink on a page. But maybe we'll save that for another day or another post. But that's something to consider, is that as far as the testament of both the Old and the New Testaments show us, that when God divests authority, it is given to people, not books, not letters, not words on a page. But anyway, back to the larger article. If a person's belief is that every word in the Bible is literally as though written by the actual creator of the universe, then, well, again, I'm not sure we have a whole lot to talk about. We're going to be talking past each other, because I can't for the life of me see how that position makes any moral or logical sense. I can't see how the position that every single word in the Bible is as though God wrote it, if God had hands and could write. I don't see how that position, which I used to hold for many years, so I understand it, but now, with eyes to see and ears to hear, I'm like, that doesn't actually make any moral sense, as we'll see here in a minute, or logical sense, because the Bible is so freaking self-contradicting and incorrect as it relates to all sorts of other scientific studies and what we know about the universe. It's just wrong. So I don't know, maybe God just intentionally wrote things wrong. That'd be weird. The sheer number of times moving on. The sheer number of times in the Old Testament, for example, when God commands people to murder, should alone be enough to stop the hyper-literal Bible reader in their tracks. It often isn't, but it should be. Like, for reals though, either you believe that God is cool with killing innocent people, even to the point of ordering. Now, I know many of you you're going to be like, nobody's innocent. They're all sinners. They all deserve. Well, okay. Well, we're not going to go down that rabbit trail of hell. No, hard pass. Whatever God is conceived of that said being would just burn millions, if not billions of people just for being born and not having the right beliefs. Get behind me, Satan. It's not the God of Jesus. You can have that God. It's just not the God of Jesus. So getting off track. I will get to hell someday. This is not that day. Either you believe that God is cool with killing innocent people, even to the point of ordering humans in Israel to do the same in the Old Testament, or you acknowledge that something else is going on in those moments. Whenever you read God, or Yahweh or Elohim, whenever you read God in the Old Testament, committing and commanding what can rightly and obviously be called evil and wicked acts, I'm telling you, that's not God. That's not actual real God. Maybe it's just me, but I reject the idea that God is a murdering deity who permits himself, herself, themselves, and then sometimes humans as well, to act in evil and unjust ways. If you want to believe in a God like that, I suppose that's your right. But for God's sake, literally, for the sake of actual God, stop thinking you're talking about the same God that Jesus worshiped and that the New Testament said Jesus was an exact representation of. Can't do it. Cannot do it. That's not that God. So if we set aside those hopefully few among us, I don't mean us live, it just means sort of general within Christendom, if we set aside those among us who take a view of scripture that says that every single word literally read is exactly true and as God would have written it had God had hands, then we end up coming to a much more reasonable and I would argue moral landing place, which is that understanding things like understanding and applying scripture is a complex endeavor. I think it's okay to acknowledge that. And I've talked about that before. It's not about just opening an English translation and being like, oh, that's what it says, and therefore that settles it. No. And since we cannot reasonably or again, morally take everything at face value, nor can we interpret and apply everything on a literal level, we have to accept that there are other factors contributing to how we read and understand the Bible. And this is obvious by now, right? That there are other factors than just reading the English words. Like we know this, right? And I suggest that we know this in our bones to be true. That there are times when we come to words in the Bible and be like, we can't just read that at face value and take it as is. There are other things that we have to do before we can get to a point of making sort of meaning or interpretive declarations about it or application. For example, we know that when you read something like Deuteronomy 20, which my Bible titles Rules for Warfare, great little subtitle there, then we know that what we're reading cannot be described as good or loving or compassionate or merciful. It's not. In other words, can you picture, like you read Genesis or Deuteronomy 20 on your own time, can you picture Jesus doing the things that you're reading? If you can't, then I would suggest to you that we're probably in the territory of these words either mean something different than what they appear at face value, or maybe this part isn't a perfect expression of God. So that's a little cheat sheet there for you. A little quick tip for Bible reading and interpretation. Can you imagine Jesus saying and or doing this? If not, then perhaps there's something else going on than this immediate face value, and or maybe what it is just isn't. It's not God. Okay, so then I get into details a little bit here. I say, because in this chapter, Deuteronomy 20, the Israelites are given instructions on how to go to battle against the Canaanites. And they're told that, hey, if the cities surrender, if you come at them with your army and they're like, we give up, raise the white flag, then, hey, you only kill the males. Yes, that's correct. If the city surrenders, then you kill the males. That's a really nice God for you, because then the women and the children and the property you get to keep as your slaves and your spoils. Wow, what a glorious thing. But if the city it doesn't surrender, or if the city is located within the boundary line of the promised land, well, then the Israelites were instructed, again, by the God character in this story, were instructed to, oh, I just saw my screen go weird on me, but we're fine. The God character instructed them to kill everybody. Quote, you must not spare any living thing. And why? What's the justification that God gave for such an order? So that the foreigners wouldn't taint Israel with their pagan ways. Now, I don't need to belabor the point. There are more examples that I could cite where the God character in the stories acts and says things that are obviously and clearly not good, not loving, not compassionate, not mercy, not things that Jesus would do. There are more examples I could cite. Examples where the words on the page very, very clearly do not match up with what is good. I don't care how you slice it, slaughtering people is not love. And if your idea of God is that is love, then, well, I guess we're back to this point where we probably don't have much to talk about. And so my point here in this post, if I have one, I felt like I was losing the thread on this, but that's all right. We're good. My point is that there are enough instances throughout the Bible of stories and commands that on the face of it are not good and should not be followed, should not be respected as authoritative. Instead, I suggest they should maybe be questioned. Why is that way? Could there be other explanations going on? Could it be limited to particular cultures and contexts? Should they be questioned? Should they be reconsidered? Okay, maybe that in the past that thing made sense, but does it still make sense today? Evaluated against other parts of the Bible for possible further illumination, or just downright ignored as outdated, irrelevant, not for us. The other day I got I will often get sort of like just random messages through Instagram or YouTube or Facebook, just from strangers. It's just part of the gig. And one guy just sent me a message out of the blue. I have no idea who this person is. And they're like, question, do you even know the fourth commandment? No. It wasn't. It was, do you believe in the fourth commandment? And I'll be honest, I did not know what the fourth commandment was. I do not have the 10 commandments memorized. But I just thought, it's really funny that someone just randomly asked me if I believe. Like, what do you mean if I believe in a commandment? Do I believe that it exists? Yes. I think what he was asking is like, do I adhere to it? And I just thought, what a weird thing. Like, why are we, unless you're Jewish, then if you're Jewish, then you at least have reason to submit to these ancient commandments Moses gave Israel. God gave Moses, Moses gave Israel. But for the rest of us, like, what do the 10 commandments have to, like, why does it matter? It doesn't. Irrelevant, outdated. If you really want to get into the weeds of it, just Jesus was like, you know what? You can sum all that up. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. That sums up all the prophets. Let's not get caught. Let's not lose the forest for the trees here. So there are parts of the Bible that should not be respected as authoritative. Rather, they should be questioned, reconsidered, evaluated against other parts of the Bible, or maybe just ignored, or possibly even entirely rejected because they are not good. Yeah, that's it. That paragraph right there. That's what I took 2,000 words to say this week. If we choose to submit to the authority of the Bible, which, as I said last week, may not be appropriate for everyone for very good reasons, then we need to do it in such a way where we retain the freedom to choose to submit. This is not an obey situation. We have the freedom to choose to submit, and we should really only be submitting to those parts that are worthy of our respect, that are good. Now, don't mishear me. Don't mishear me. This isn't about picking and choosing the parts we like or don't like. Liking has nothing to do with it. Rather, I'm saying that if portions of the Bible are not good, we are under no obligation to listen to it or respect it. And while I'm sure you want me to define what I mean when I say good, because I get it, it's a really subjective term, that is far beyond the scope of this article. So you're just going to have to deal with the tension of, well, how do we know if it's good? My only hope here is to point out that there is such a thing as parts of the Bible that claim to be, quote, from God, but that are clearly and obviously not good. And if you want to take out an O from there, you'd say that are clearly and obviously not God. Not good nor God. The reality that those examples do exist, I believe, are sufficient for us to then say to the rest of the Bible, okay, if you want to be authoritative in my life, you're going to have to show me that you're good and that you're worthy of my respect, that you're worthy of me coming into this agreeable submission under your authority. All right. That is my part 4 on my Authority of the Bible series. And this is my Substack page. So you can, every week I put the link on there to know how to join me on YouTubes and Facebooks and where you can catch up on past series. Okay. Don't need to do that. All right. Moving back to then just this scene here, where Mandy's star is. Great. Mandy, don't be offended. I'm not taking your star away. I'm just hiding it. Okay. I see some comments here. I'm going to tune back into this. So let's see. Yeah, Junior obeys from back when we were talking about that, the whole obeying within the context of church without question has caused so much issues in church. Then Junior asks, why do I place my own personal understanding of morality on God? God does not murder. Why do you place your own personal understanding of morality on God? Let's see. I think if God is at least not as moral as we are, then that's a problem. So I'll start there. It's like Jesus said, if even you as a father, a human father who are pretty messed up, have the potential for great wickedness, if even you, when your son asks you for a piece of bread, like you don't give him a stone, do you? No. Well, then how much more your Father in heaven? Which is sort of a classic Jewish move of saying, if at least this, then how much more this? So I think we can on some level be like, if God is at all good, and look, maybe we're all being fooled. Maybe the joke is on all of us that whatever creator out there does have this real wicked streak to them. Maybe. Very skeptical of that. But if God is at all to be good, then I would argue God has to be at least as good as the goodest human. And I believe that murder is not good or kind or compassionate. And I know that you say that God does not murder, but if we take, especially these stories in the Old Testament, at face value, as some Christians are wont to do, that is murder. Trying to dress it up as something else as justified or as permissible because it's God, to me is crap. It's just total hermeneutical crap. Put that on the back of a textbook. Hermeneutical crap. Sincerely, Colby Martin. And just if you haven't joined me before, I will throw these comments on the screen without having pre-read them, so I often don't know what's going to happen when it happens. Imagine believing God told Saul to kill all the children and infants in Amalek, and also believing the same God is good and worthy of praise. Yeah. That's the thing, is it's just not a God worthy of praise to me it's only a God who's worthy of being praised if you happen to be on the right side of that God. then yeah, like he's the most high God. He's worthy of our praise. Yeah, it turns out because you're not the ones that's being killed. Andrew says, I've come to understand the way you're describing the Bible, the literal words or embodiment of God is closer to the description of the Quran than the Bible. That might be. I have no expertise in the Quran or in the religion of Islam. But the idea of fundamentalism exists in all religions. And so fundamentalist Muslims and fundamentalist Christians, I believe, both are guilty of this hyper-literal approach to their holy texts. I would agree with you there. Junior says, how can the creator of life murder to forcibly take away life that is not your own? If he gives life, he is at liberty to take it, whether we deem it unfair as us asserting our own morality. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I just disagree. I disagree that because someone gives life, you can take it away. Like if a parent kills their child, that's murder. And the parent's the one that brought that child. You don't own that life just because you brought it into being. And I don't think that then scale that up to God, that principle then falls away. Be like, oh, well, God. And I get it. There are Bible verses like the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Yeah, for me, that's sort of a back end way to sort of reflect back and try to make sense and meaning of life. Be like, man, life is really random, isn't it? It's just the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Who can know when blessings will come, when cursings will come, when what we think is a blessing becomes a curse, and what we think is a curse becomes a blessing? It is, for me, that is not, though, this sense that God can take away a human life, and yet because it's God, we don't call it murder or killing, or it's not good to me. I mean, again, you, Junior, or anyone else is welcome to worship a God in which you're comfortable with that God being a killing God. I'm not. I'm not. And I don't think that's the God that Jesus worshiped. And I certainly don't think it's the God that the early church had in mind when they said that Jesus guy, he was like an exact representation. He was the express image of God. That God to me is not a killing God. Yeah. All right. Colton says Dr. Chris Green has an interesting method of reading these sorts of texts where he identifies a different character in the story who actually reflects Jesus and subverts the interpretation of God given. I don't think I know Dr. Chris Green. It sounds interesting though. Hey, Carl J. Schneller. I'm going to put your comment up and then read it. We'll see what happens. The living word of God, which is Jesus, well pointed out, is the only true authority. Too much credence is given to the written word of God. Since it was translated by men who did not want to know what language it was written, it cannot be considered the last source of authority. So I love that you're pointing that out, Carl, that the only time the Bible refers to the word, or I shouldn't say only, someone's going to correct me on that, but John chapter 1, in the beginning was the word was with God, and the word, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. Well, the word, the logos, is not the Bible. The word is the embodiment of the Christ in this Rabbi Jesus. Yeah. So we talked about this earlier on in the show, that when God does grant authority, God grants authority to humans. Humans get the authority, not words on a page. Andrew says, without getting into the problem of good, yes, how nebulous that was. Can you clarify the distinction between picking and choosing based on like versus good? Yeah, that's a really helpful comment, Andrew. Because I talked about how what's going on here for me, at least, is not just I don't like that, I don't like that, that doesn't fit my, so I'm not going to submit to that. For me, I'm aware that there are things that are really, really good that I don't like, and there are things that I like that I can admit are ultimately not good. And as slippery as the term good is, for me, it's a word that's at least trying to name a sense of well-being, a sense of flourishing, a sense of wholeness. I was thinking earlier this week about the idea of perfect. Like, why do we think perfect is all that great? Perfect's not that great. Perfect is finished, complete. It's a real Greek idea. And so we're all sort of post-Greek here in the, here in America, at least in Western civilization, we're all post-Greek thinkers. And the Greeks loved the ideal, the perfect. And more Eastern thinking, and this is certainly true of ancient Jewish thinking, perfection isn't necessarily all that interesting. Wholeness and goodness and growth. And anyways, so for me, goodness is just trying to name, does this contribute to flourishing? Does this contribute to well-being? At our church, we talk about wholeness in 3 ways: spiritual wholeness, social wholeness, and emotional wholeness. And things that are good feed into that. And I think that is, for me, a categorical, a different category than just things I might like or not like. I don't know if that was all that helpful. Oh, good. Mandy, I'm glad this was great. And I will check out your message later. Phil points out that everyone filters the Bible to obey and which to reject. The only difference is the criteria we use to filter. Yeah, I love what you're saying. The idea that the criticism that I think a lot of evangelicals give of non and or post and or ex evangelicals is that you're just picking and choosing. Well, we all pick and choose. We all pick and choose. Everybody picks and choose. But what I found is when evangelicals pick and choose, what they call it is no, it's just so. For instance, when Paul writes that women shouldn't wear gold or that men shouldn't have long hair, uh, you know, you say to an evangelical, well, then why, if you're a woman, why are you wearing gold? Eh? Or why do you have long hair if you're a dude? And you're picking and choosing. You're not following that. And they would say, well, no, that was a cultural thing, or that was specific to this kind of, and you just interrupt and be like, exactly. That is 100% correct. This is what part of this whole article here today is like. When you acknowledge that you don't, nobody does, just reads the whole thing, hyperliteral face value. You hit parts often where you bring in other factors to help understand what's going on. We all do this. We all pick and choose. So yeah, we just have different filters. Anyway, good point, Phil. Junior says, do you think the God of the Old Testament is different to the God of the New Testament? I think that there are stories in the Old Testament in which God is referenced. Might be Yahweh, might be Elohim, depends on which source was used to compile and edit that particular document. And yes, 100%, I think there are times where the character, I don't know how else to say it, the character referenced, whether with the title God or Yahweh or Elohim, is not actually God, being the ultimate reality, however you want to describe it. And I get that then the follow-up to that is, oh, wait, so then you just know, Colby, which time it is God and which time it isn't God? No, I don't. I feel like I have some decent guesses sometimes. And they're not completely unfounded guesses. This is where I think Jesus is a really helpful filter. To go back to Phil's comment about filters, Jesus is a really helpful filter. Is this image, is this character of God in the Old Testament, does it match up? Does it line up with the person of Jesus? If it does, then I think we can be more confident that who was being referenced in this story is a pretty good manifestation, reflection, illustration, description of God. If not, then who is this character? Well, it might have just been the Israelites' idea of who God was. It might have just been sort of ancient Babylon's ideas of who the gods were, sort of in making their way into some of the Israelites' ideas about God. Or there might be other explanations going on. So I think, to your question, is the God of the Old Testament different to the God of the New Testament? I just think that question, as it's framed, isn't necessarily answerable, because in the Old Testament, there are a plurality of God characters. And this is something that I understand is surprising for a lot of people who have never sort of known this about the Bible. But for instance, the oldest Hebrew tribe folk were polytheists. So originally, Yahweh was just seen as the God above other gods, the Most High God. To go back to the commandments again, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Why was that a commandment? Because there were other gods. And so Moses was like, I think if we're going to follow Yahweh, Yahweh should be the Most High one, the one of whom no other should be before. And then if Israel sort of evolved past or out of or moved beyond this polytheism to monotheism, there is actually one God. Anyway, so yeah, I think there's just, consider that, Junior, that within the Old Testament, there's a lot of different, quote, gods. And then in the New Testament, I think it does get a little bit more clear as to who and what God is. And people were like, Jesus, he illuminates God really, really well. Jesse writes, it's funny that more The longer your comment is, the larger your profile picture will come. It's funny, the more conservative Christians say that the Old Testament God is actually merciful by killing, right? Yeah, I just feel like it can be a cop-out sometimes, or ordering the killing of others. They justify it by comparing it to the death penalty, which I pretty sure I stand against. They justify it by comparing to the death penalty. We kill murderers to prevent them from murdering, thus it is loving. It's loving humanity. That's never made sense to me, Jesse says, though, because people are always able to change. Love is always able to change others. Yeah, well said. Hey, Fred Freeman. Sorry, I'm just catching up. I see there's lots more comments coming in here, and I got all long-winded about some other things I was saying. I like that, Phil. When I was stumbling over how to describe good, you said good is that which yields eternal life, life of the ages, wholeness. Colton says, imagine how anxious Paul would be if he found out that billions of people believe the letters he wrote to his friend Timothy were the words of God. Yeah, I often think about that too, Colton, that, I can see how, for instance, the gospel writers, the authors of the book, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Acts, they were conscious of how they were really trying to put something down that would outlast them. Now, whether or not they thought they were contributing to a New Testament, that it would be held on par with their Torah, their scriptures, I don't know that, but I feel convinced that the letters, like from Paul and Peter, they were not writing them thinking, and these shall therefore then for the next 2,000 years be thought of as though God's self were writing it. Another question from Junior here. In Acts 5, where Ananias and Sapphira lie to the church before Peter, and by the power of the Spirit of the Lord, do you think God, Jesus, Holy Spirit murdered Ananias and Sapphira? No, I don't think God murdered Ananias and Sapphira. I do not. I don't remember that story. I mean, I remember that story. I don't remember the story in enough detail, but I feel like the last time I went through that story, I was like, first of all, that's a weird story. So there's a lot of freedom in just being able to name. That's a weird story. And then usually the first question I will ask is, why was this story preserved? What is it about this? Because it's true of all the Old Testament and all the stories in the New Testament, like they only sort of held on to some of them. Why? So I think that's just that takes you to some interesting places when you just ask it that way. Why might have this story been preserved? Why might it have been told the way that it was told? But no, at the end of the day, I don't think God killed them for lying. Yeah. And then Phil says this, which I can neither confirm nor deny because I don't have the story right in front of me, but he says they died, not that God killed them. So thanks for chiming in there, Phil. All right, it is just hit post 3 o'clock, and I generally try to keep these under 60 minutes. If for no other reason than so that I can repost it to Instagram, and Instagram has a 60-minute limit. So I will maybe pick up some of these other questions next week. If you haven't yet done so, please visit colbymartin.substack.com to sign up for my newsletter, and then go ahead and just put a little reminder in your phone, a little ding on 2 p.m. or maybe even 1:55. Give yourself a chance to get settled with some tea or some water to join me live as we hang out together on Wednesdays for Perspective Shift. Kenneth just got here. Sorry, Kenneth. I'll have to see you next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Colton. Y'all have a lovely week, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Perspective Shift. I'm going to now invite you to do one of 3 things, or do them all if you're an overachiever. First, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my free Perspective Shift newsletter. You can do that by going to colbymartin.substack.com. This will ensure that each week the articles that I write arrive safely in your inbox. Second, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and hit subscribe on my channel. That'd be awesome. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, would you click like on my page? For me, this is a win-win in that it helps me know that you're out there and that you care. Plus, it helps you know when I'm going live. For all my other work, including books that I've written or sermons that I've preached, head on over to colbymartinonline.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me live next week.